From literally walking his way to the #1 ranking in Rome, to having the chance to keep that ranking if he wins the French Open. Here's how Carlos Alcaraz has returned to #1 in the ATP rankings. All he needed to do was walk onto the court in Rome. Confused? Don't worry, I'll explain. During the 2023 Italian Open, the top spot in the ATP rankings was so closely contested that all Alcaraz needed to do to get that top spot was walk onto the court. He hadn't played in Rome before the 2023 edition, and with Novak Djokovic being the defending champion, it meant that he couldn't possibly improve his points tally in Rome in 2023. So Alcaraz, who was making his debut in Rome, simply needed to get 10 points to go first. In fact, only 5 points were separating the two before the beginning of the 2023 Italian Open. And regardless of where Djokovic finished, the Spaniard's appearance in the competition would have been enough to get him those points. Tennis is a crazy sport, isn't it? I mean, that's an insane way to become the #1. But what people don't understand is that a lot of hard work went in before the Italian Open, so he didn't exactly get lucky, unlike what the majority of fans like to believe. Alcaraz needed to get his total close to Djokovic's, having already lost the chance to play in the Australian Open in 2023, which the Joker won with relative ease. In fact, it was basically his form since his 2023 campaign began, which earned him that ranking. You see, Alcaraz didn't have much luck the first time he became the world's #1. That happened right after his first Grand Slam win, at the US Open 2022, and since then, the young Spaniard struggled a lot with injuries to end his year. Unfortunately, he couldn't recover in time for the first slam of 2023 in Melbourne, and that meant Djokovic was set to overtake him in the rankings. Most believed that once the Serb returned to #1, he was going to hold it for the majority of the year. Enter Alcaraz. He had a lot of pressure to prove that those mad results in 2022 weren't all luck, so he needed to replicate that form in 2023. From the very first tournament he played, the Argentina Open, it was clear that Alcaraz was trying to prove his level and looking to get back to his best. And after struggling in the first match against Laslo Djere, the Spaniard ripped through the rest of the competition, taking apart Dusan Lajovic, Bernabe Zapata Miralles, and Cameron Norrie, without dropping a set and winning his first title of 2023. A loss in the finals in the following week to Cam Norrie in Rio was enough to plant the seeds of doubt among fans and analysts, though. But the Sunshine Double was when Carlos came into his own. We saw the best of him in Indian Wells. The bigger the tournament, the better he gets, right? Entering the Sunshine Double in Indian Wells, Carlos had to battle through a tough list of players if he were to become the world's #1. He was helped by the fact that Djokovic was out of Indian Wells due to injury, and winning the crown in California would be enough for him to get the ranking back. He'd already made the semifinals of Indian Wells in 2022, so he needed to go all the way to earn some points. Thanasi Kokkinakis and Talon Griekspoor couldn't live with him, and Jack Draper had to retire, resulting in a walkover for the Spaniard as he moved into the quarters. There, his first tough test awaited. The Canadian Felix Auger-Aliassime was hoping to make some strides in 2023, but even he couldn't so much as get a set off him. That set up a blockbuster semi-final clash between two young rivals, Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner, and it doesn't really get better than that. The first set was a thing of beauty, as both stars battled hard and long, but Carlos edged the Italian in the first set, cruising to a win in the second. Now awaiting him in the final was Daniil Medvedev, who'd been on a pretty good run himself. This was scary good from Carlos Alcaraz because defeating someone like Medi, who is exceptional on hard courts and is in form, was truly the turning point. After all, Alcaraz didn't just beat him, he destroyed him, losing only 5 games in the entire match. But the twist came in Miami. The newly crowned #1, Carlos had the chance to extend his lead at the top here, with Djokovic not playing either. And honestly, it looked like Alcaraz would cruise through to a second Miami title in as many years. But this time, in the semifinals, Jannik Sinner took his revenge, knocking out the Spaniard. That proved to be too much, as the Spaniard had to defend his crown to stay #1, and Djokovic, despite his absence from the Sunshine Double, got back to #1 with a 380-point advantage over Alcaraz going into the clay swing. That's when things started getting very interesting, though. Because the thing is that Djokovic has been the second best player on clay for a decade or so. I mean, no one can't be the number one on clay during the Rafael Nadal era. A strong reputation in two tournaments in particular, the Monte Carlo Masters and the Italian Open. He did that, only for things to get even better for him, because Djokovic lost early in Rome. Oh yeah! While the tennis world was bummed out because they weren't getting a Djokovic-Alcaraz battle, due to Carlos' exit from Rome, the Spaniard also started breathing a little easier when Djokovic suffered another loss ahead of the French Open. This time to the young sensation Holger Rune in the quarterfinals of the Italian Open. That loss proved to be a big one in the history of the tournament. Why? Well, you see, ever since Rafa won his first title in Rome, at least one of either Djokovic or Nadal has been in the final. But the streak was now officially broken in 2023, and it cost the 22-time Grand Slam winner massively, because having won the title in 2022, he had a lot to lose. With that exit, Djokovic slips to third in the rankings. Yep, Daniil Medvedev was the beneficiary, as he won his first career title on clay, breaking an 8-year curse and moving to second in the rankings. And now, all three players have their destinies for the top spot in their own hands. Alcaraz has nearly a 500-point lead on the Russian in second, while Novak is a further 300 points behind Medvedev. That said, it was confirmed that Carlos won't be making the Monte Carlo Masters due to a niggling injury. That meant the ball was back in the Serbian's court to extend his lead, only for him to suffer 2 defeats early in the 2 clay tournaments he played. The first one came to Lorenzo Musetti in the round of 16 in Monte Carlo. The other one at the Srpska Open at the hands of fellow Serb Dusan Lajovic. Suddenly, Djokovic wasn't the favorite anymore for the number one ranking going into the French Open, especially because Carlos turned from injury, while the Joker had to sit out the Madrid Masters. That changed things dramatically. Alcaraz had already picked up another title in Barcelona, where he was the defending champion from the year before, and he had the chance to make it 2 in a row in Madrid again. So despite a tough route to the finals, the Spaniard did just enough to defend the 1,000 points in Madrid, and that brought the battle for the number one ranking to Rome. Like I said earlier, Alcaraz had done enough to get back to the top, and all he needed was to walk onto the court against Albert Ramos Vinolas in Italy. You get 2,000 points for winning a Grand Slam. Medvedev, however, will have the most to earn, because he exited the competition during the 4th round in 2022, and that means going all the way will bring him the biggest chunk. It'll be enough for him to move ahead of Alcaraz if he wins the Roland Garros in 2023. On the other hand, both Djokovic and Carlos lost in the quarterfinals of the 2022 French Open to Rafa and Sasha respectively, which means they've got an equal amount of points to win should they go all the way in Paris. But again, if Djokovic were to win his 3rd French Open, he'll have enough points to overtake Alcaraz, regardless of whether he makes the final or not. So in a way, all the top 3 players in the men's rankings have their futures in their own hands, and all they need to do is win the French Open. Of course, it's never easy to win a Grand Slam, but not having serial winner Rafael Nadal challenge for his 15th crown will be very helpful for all 3 of them. So from having the chance to keep that ranking, if he wins the French Open, to literally walking his way to the number 1 ranking in Rome, that was how Carlos Alcaraz returned to number 1.